Now, Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development says investors in the sector can now enjoy tax and duty-free holidays for 5 years for agricultural production and processing and zero tariff rates on the importation of agrochemicals. Well, meanwhile, farmers are raising concerns over repayment of loans collected under the CBN schemes as farmlands lay waste due to nationwide flooding. Kola Masha, the CEO of Babban, Gona, joins me to discuss these developments. Kola, thank you for taking the time out to join us today.
My pleasure.
If you can hear me, Kola, let's get right to it. Let's unpack the terms and conditions, as it were, for this 5-year tax break. Let's talk about how are you unpacking it and who stands to benefit?
Wonderful. I can hear you perfectly. Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Perfect. So I think, so first of all, I think this is a very promising step. I think at the end of the day, ensuring that we have the right incentive structures to attract private sector capital into the sector is very important. I think fundamentally, I think it will have an impact. We have already seen the impact that the pioneer status has had in attracting investment more broadly into Nigeria. I particularly like the fact that it is focused both on production and processing, because I think the two have to go hand in hand. And then it also creates an opportunity for incentives around offsetting some of the costs with importation. I think it will definitely have a major impact on driving the sector.
But what do you like most about this latest plan by the tax break from the federal government?
Well, I think for me, I think the complementary nature of it between production and processing, I think are both very, very key. I would say, however, that to a certain degree, the 5 years may be a little bit on the low end, particularly when you're talking about on the production side. Oftentimes there is quite a kind of a long gestation period on the production side between preparing the land, opening up different portions and getting things moving. Particularly if you're looking at some of the plantation crops, tree crops like rubber, like oil palm, so on and so forth, you're looking at not even generating revenues on those types of crops till 8-9 years. I think areas that could have been further enhanced is potentially targeting particular crops and particular sectors that may have a larger job creation and economic impact. I think at the end of the day, there is a trade-off that the government is setting here and reducing potential revenues, and we want to make sure that that trade-off is being done in a strategic way.
All right. I'd like you to just quickly shed some light on this one other developing story. Farmers raising concerns over loans from CBN schemes worth over 1.4 trillion naira. What do we need to know about this story?
Well, I think, at the end of the day, many of those programs should have had some level of agricultural insurance as part of them. I do believe that agricultural insurance is a mandatory component in many of these programs, these loan programs that you get. So in theory, that agricultural insurance, if it is functioning correctly, should be stepping in to offset some of the losses associated with these terrible floods that many farmers unfortunately have had to deal with over the last several weeks. However, I think at the end of the day, it's important that the system has a level of integrity that folks recognize that there are ways to mitigate for some of these losses, and I think in particular there are certain parts of the country that have been particularly devastated, where there may be an opportunity to target specific government relief programs to those areas that have been particularly hard hit. but I think it's a blanket, should I say, forgiveness of all loans may actually potentially in the long term create more challenges by making folks less likely to lend to the sector.
Well, still on that particular issue, the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs has said that 569,000 hectares of farmlands have been destroyed as a result of the flooding. Now, we have seen, of course, on the news and in the newspapers, but I'd like to, you're working on the ground with some of these farmers. I'd like you to help us understand the scale of what you've seen so far, what we're dealing with, and how we can quickly begin to give these farmers some succor, and of course the impact that it could have on crop production and the overall distribution chain going forward.
Well, I think there are certain crops that have been particularly hard hit, particularly crops that are grown in lowland regions such as rice. So those crops that are particularly grown in the Fadama regions, which are basically the farmlands that border the rivers, major rivers, River Niger, River Benue, stretching from Kebbi all the way down to the Delta. Those particular crops, we are going to see likely going to see significant challenges. And I think, having particular programs to not just support the farmers to offset their losses today, but help them bounce back even stronger come 2023, I think would be a very critical program. I think if we take a book from the former Minister of Agriculture, Dr. Akin Adesina, I think when we had a similar challenge several years ago, one of the big initiatives that they drove was to try to, as much as possible, support farmers in those crops most hard hit with a large dry season crop, so that you can help to ensure that the farmers during that dry season are able to kind of make up for some of the losses that they would have sustained during this rainy season crop. So I think strategically there may be an opportunity to target.
All right, thank you. We have run out of time. Thank you for talking to us, Kola. We appreciate your time on the show today. Kola Masha, CEO of Babban Gona.